tales in a digital sleigh.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So if you work in qualitative research, and I mean digging into interviews, analyzing user feedback, that kind of thing, you're probably feeling it.
Oh, yeah.
You are standing squarely in the middle of a methodological earthquake.
That's a good way to put it. And that earthquake is generative AI.
Exactly. And the noise you're hearing, that's the backlash. We've seen these rapidly growing calls for things like slow scholarship.
Handmade research.
Right. And the critique is, it's pretty blunt. It basically says AI is destroying the thoughtful, intimate process of deep analysis. It's making our insights standardized.
Superficial and fast.
So is using AI truly just intellectual fast food? Our mission today is to analyze the language of that critique, understand why some of the bad work is happening, and define what we're calling a powerful third way.
Right. A way where technology doesn't replace depth,
but actually enhances it.
And we really have to start by tackling the way this whole debate is structured, because frankly, it's functioning as a rhetorical trap.
A trap? How so?
Well, our sources immediately highlight that people feel they have to choose one of two identities. You're either the thoughtful, organic artisan, or you're the mindless industrial machine. And once you accept that binary, you stop looking for any creative solutions.
Okay, let's unpack that rhetorical trap first, because the language the critics use is definitely designed to make you feel morally superior if you choose the slow side.
Right.
We're calling this segment Fast Food versus Organic Gardens.
It's masterful narrative building, really. When critics frame AI-supported analysis, they reach for that machine or, that fast food vocabulary. They use adjectives designed to strip away any intellectual credit. Faster, efficient, hurried.
Standardized, superficial. And the verbs they choose are just as reductive. You don't explore themes, you generate insights.
You don't interpret, you process data.
You run an analysis or you convert transcripts. The implication is that using AI is just, this act of mechanical production.
Right. It prioritizes metrics and speed over genuine substance. It sounds like you're not even thinking. You're just pulling a lever.
Lever, yeah.
But then you look at the contrast, the artisan frame, the handmade research model. This language is all about nourishment and craft. We see adjectives like organic, slow, intimate.
Healthful, and my personal favorite from the sources, flavorful. The analysis is supposed to be ambiguous and imperfect.
Right. And their verbs, they suggest this almost spiritual connection to the material.
Oh, absolutely.
You nurture the themes.
You root out meaning. You embrace ambiguity.
You grow knowledge.
It's incredibly powerful. Who wants standardized fast food analysis when you could have a flavorful organic insight?
Nobody.
But here is the pivotal turning point this deep dive reveals. This binary, it's a trap because it assumes the digital tool just inherently strips the soul from the process.
It forces the idea that thinking stops the moment the technology starts. And that foundational assumption is precisely where we need to introduce some nuance. Because look, while the fear is maybe overblown, we have to acknowledge that the critique isn't groundless.
No, it's not.
Our sources confirm there is a surplus of low-quality, superficial work contaminating the field right now.
Okay, so where is that coming from?
Well, this low-quality work is generally fueled by two different groups. First, you have computer scientists who sometimes enter the qualitative domain trying to, quote, automate analysis completely.
Right, in the name of just pure, unexamined speed.
A goal that actively rejects the whole philosophy of qualitative research.
And the second group.
And this is maybe the most important group for you, the researcher. It's the practitioners who genuinely want to use these tools but just lack the necessary AI literacy.
They're the ones who make the critiques feel valid.
Yes, because they are using these incredibly advanced tools in really primitive ways.
You can see that in the methodological dead ends. The sources talk about researchers wasting weeks, literally weeks, conducting full studies based on deeply flawed prompting strategies. They'll try to force a comparison between, say, rigorous manual coding and the outputs from a simple default LLM prompt, asking something like, give me the 3 main themes.
And that's exactly the kind of move an AI-literate practitioner just recognizes as futile from the start. A thoughtful, qualitative researcher would never accept that prompt as generating meaningful insight.
So what would they do instead?
A high literacy approach, by contrast, might demand something like, act as a critical theorist and identify 3 areas of contradiction in this transcript.
Oh, okay.
You must cite numbers and explain your specific interpretive process, outlining the theoretical framework you used.
So that's the difference between asking for a summary and demanding a genuine critique.
Absolutely. The output from that first prompt will be shallow and standardized. It's the fast food everyone rightly fears.
But the second one forces the machine to reveal its intellectual scaffolding.
Well, here I have to intervene. That was not necessarily how I would formulate a prompt, because the prompt that was proposed here, well, it goes to more detail and it shows that you can ask more than just, for 3 themes, but it gives a lot of responsibility to the AI. So, because this is an AI-generated podcast, so it takes my blog writing and produces something. So of course here I'm also turning over completely responsibility of what comes out to Notebook LM, who produces this podcast. But that's maybe also a nice example that if you turn on, or sometimes something comes out from an LLM, and then you have to also evaluate that and see what the quality of is what came out. So instead of asking for like 3 conflicting viewpoints or something like that, well, you could do that, and it's not a bad idea, but not as a starting point in the analysis. So the first part would always be more retrieving information so that you can be part of the analysis. You are the one guiding the analysis and working together with the AI. So that's why you cannot just start analysis directly with, give 3 conflicting points, because the AI will give you an answer, but you might be lost because you haven't been maybe part of, you first have to get to know the data and be part of the analysis as we've always been. And so we haven't kind of jumped into hypothesis testing or, conclusions right away. That is something I see a lot more people do with AI. It's always, they jumped immediately to the end of the analysis and stuff. Like, no, we need to start where we started, where we always started, also in the past, with the beginning of interrogating the data and staying close to it, and then our insights or whatever we learn from the data grows from step 1, 2, and 3 before we then ask about okay, now we learned something and we learned some concepts. Now go look whether there is something in the data that contradicts those things that we have learned from the data. It might be concepts, it might be other aspects. So that's why I try to keep it general. After a short break, Tom and Lisa continue with their discussion.
Let's dive in. Qualitative flow, leading the way.
What's fascinating here is the call to action that comes out of this. Instead of just rushing to condemn the technology, which the source calls slowing down the hype,
Practitioners need to take the time to actually learn how to use it properly.
Exactly. Many critics, as we're seeing, are judging the entire landscape based on these basic interactions with general-purpose chatbots.
And that quick and dirty experience just doesn't generalize to responsible AI-supported analysis.
Not at all.
This brings us to a really essential checkpoint. If we're going to fight this charge that we're creating standardized superficial work, we have to master the rules of the new qualitative kitchen.
I like that.
So let's run a quick literacy check right now. If you're going to be the chef, you need to know your tools and, crucially, their constraints.
Okay, where do we start?
First up, context windows.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
True AI literacy means knowing not just the output, but how the LLM processes data. So if a researcher tries to just input 20 full multi-page interviews at once, what's going to happen?
Well, you've essentially destroyed the intimacy of the data connection that the whole organic research process strives for.
Right. The LLM's context window, its short-term memory, is limited.
And if you exceed it, the machine literally forgets the beginning of your data set. You're left drawing conclusions based on a partial or even a skewed view of the material.
Understanding that is just fundamental for rigor.
So here I have to add something again. So it depends on the tool they're using, how AI is dealing with the context window limit, and it also depends on the LLM, what context window, meaning short memory of the LLM you have, can be anything. Well, most will have at least 200 pages, but some more advanced models these days also have up to 500 pages or more. So that is something you should be aware of, so you can ask the right questions. So what happens if you upload more data than the context window can handle? So some tools will not allow you to upload more, but it could be, as the podcasters, actually, our hosts said, that it's going to forget the first part of the data. But it could also be that the tool is summarizing before it's actually processing the data, and then you get like high-level answer, and you think like, yeah, but that's too superficial. So these are all potential things that can happen. Or if you work with a purpose-built tool like Q Insights, so how do we deal with the context window limit? Is by doing some pre-processing of the data. So it always depends on the type of analysis. But if you ask for where people talk about strategies or emotions or trust or whatever, that's not in all of your data. So we don't need to send all of your data for processing. And that also has to do also with, if you follow AI guidelines, that you follow the idea of data, what is called, not scarcity, but that you only send the data that's actually necessary. So that also has to do with responsible AI use. So you're not always kind of send all 1,000 pages that are necessary, or not necessary actually for a type of analysis that you want to run. So there are several things that can actually happen, and why I'm mentioning that context window is because what we read a lot is that AI can now process vast amounts of data. So people kind of think like, oh, I can just upload my 100 PDFs and for doing a literature analysis or whatever. That's not possible. Then we are at the pre-generative AI age, the artificial intelligence with big data and NLP, natural language processing. That's when you can analyze thousands of documents. But we are talking about generative AI now, and we didn't use big data tools before that either in qualitative analysis because it wasn't fulfilling our purpose. So also now we cannot just throw at it hundreds of documents. That doesn't work either. And even if you stay within that context window, even if you send, if the context window is 500 pages, then if you send 500 pages, you still get very high level answers. Even if it can process it, not forgetting stuff in between, if you send it so much data, it will not give you all the details. Otherwise, it has to also output 200 pages, and there's also something like an output limit. So there's also a restriction on how many pages the output can be. So the LLM will start summarizing when you give it lots of data, even if it's within that context window. And that's why you will hear me, also the AI host, also recommending to working with 3-5 documents at a time and not with 20 or 25. Because with qualitative research, you want to get details and you don't want to get stuck with high-level answers. So keep that in mind. Knowing about the context window is important, because then you can ask the right question. Like, what is the context window with the particular LLM I am actually using, or the LLM, the tool is using that I'm working with. So it's all about knowing that, asking the right questions, and then even within that, working with the knowledge that also processing 200 pages of data at once, it might be good for a theme analysis because you want to pick out the high-level themes. That's fine. But if you want to go into more detail, you're not going to process 20 interviews at once.
Okay, what's next?
Then there is temperature. It governs the randomness and creativity of the output. This is a vital methodological dial.
So if you're analyzing emergent themes and you want rigor and consistency,
You demand a lower temperature setting. Simple as that.
but if you're looking for those rich ambiguities the handmade research praises, you might actually dial the temperature up.
Exactly. To force the LLM to generate more unexpected associations, which then stimulates new thought patterns in you, the researcher.
An unskilled user just ignores it. A skilled researcher uses it as a tactical tool.
We also need to distinguish between a conventional model and a reasoning model.
Okay, what's the difference there?
A conventional model might just summarize or code superficially. That's the fast food approach.
Right.
A reasoning model, however, can be explicitly instructed to perform complex qualitative tasks. Things like synthesizing codes based on a specific theoretical framework or conducting an intersectional analysis of two separate concepts.
That difference sounds critical for achieving any real depth.
It is.
And what about this non-deterministic nature of the models? You ask the same question twice, you don't always get the same result.
Yeah, and an unskilled user sees this as a bug. They complain about inconsistency.
But a literate user.
An AI-literate user knows how to leverage this. You can use it positively to generate multiple valid perspectives on the same data point. It effectively turns the machine into a sounding board for theoretical exploration.
Interesting.
And then there's ARID retrieval augmented generation. This one's crucial for ethical and deep work.
I have to admit, until recently I thought that was just technical shorthand for messing around with data.
A lot of people do, but RRAG is how you ground the LLM's response entirely in your specific data, not its general training set.
Ah, and this is how you force traceability.
Exactly. RRAG connects the technical step directly to the ethical requirement of slow scholarship.
So every conclusion the machine offers can be traced back to an exact, quote, a line number in your data set.
No traceability, no rigor. It's that simple.
Okay, one more. What about significancy?
Right. The LLM's tendency to agree with you, to give you the answer it thinks you want.
Which is a huge methodological threat to objectivity.
A massive one. The researcher has to actively manage this bias by demanding the AI critique the data or even take an opposing view.
So you turn a technical limitation into a methodological strength.
You ensure your own biases aren't just echoed back at you.
And we can't forget the security layer. If you are handling sensitive qualitative data, interviews with vulnerable populations, for example, do you know the vital differences between a free general-purpose chatbot that trains on your data
versus calling on an LLM via a dedicated, secure API connection?
If you don't understand these concepts, you're operating blind. You might accidentally create that superficial or, even worse, unethical output everyone is so worried about.
But when you do master these constraints, the entire approach shifts. And this is the critical shift that our sources identify.
Which is?
The core error of unskilled users is asking the LLM for answers. The intellectual sweet spot, the true potential here, is using it to develop better, more nuanced questions about the data.
So the tool shouldn't deliver the final insight. It should refine the inquiry itself.
Right, allowing you to enter the analysis at a far, far deeper point.
That capability is the real benefit then. The ability to engage with your data more or less directly, maybe skipping that often laborious, soul-crushing process of initial manual coding.
Just to get a lay of the land, yeah.
Right.
But wait, let's introduce a moment of friction here. Because some scholars argue, and I think rightly so, that active clerical repetition, that initial tedious pass of applying codes, is precisely where the researcher ingests the data deeply.
Yeah, that's where the emerging categories come from. So how do we reconcile skipping that step with achieving true depth?
It's a great point, and the distinction, I think, lies in what part of coding we're actually skipping. For some, manual coding is an intrinsic part of the craft, and that's perfectly valid.
But we have to distinguish between the engaging intellectual spark of building a clever, insightful coding frame. That's the fun, thoughtful part.
And the tedious clerical repetition of applying that same code to hundreds of identical interview transcripts. That's where the soul-crushing effort is.
So if you use Gen AI to handle the repetition,
you free up your limited intellectual energy to focus immediately on the intellectually interesting, ambiguous, and contradictory patterns that the slow movement actually prizes.
You're accelerating the tedium to make more time for the thought.
Exactly.
But again, this doesn't mean the analysis is done in 5 minutes. And this brings us back to the vending machine warning.
Right. Gen AI is designed to always provide an answer.
And the danger is that the unskilled user mistakes a quick output for a valid result. They treat the tool like a vending machine. You put data in, You get analysis out.
And then what happens?
Then, when they can't trace the conclusions back, when they can't understand the mechanism the LLM used to arrive at its findings, they complain about the black box.
The sources are so clear on this that black box is often self-imposed.
How do you mean?
If you don't use a system prompt to define the AI's role, if you don't use arg to ground the data, if you don't use the temperature setting correctly, you've basically handed the keys to a void.
A skilled researcher builds a window into that black box by demanding justification and context.
The researcher failed to interrogate the machine.
Which brings us beautifully to the closing metaphor of our analysis. It's a famous parable often told about explorers pushing too hard in the jungle with local porters.
I think I know this one. The explorers were rushing, right? Desperate to reach their destination.
Exactly. But one morning, the porters just stopped. They refused to move.
And they weren't tired.
Not at all. When the explorers demanded an explanation, the head porter replied, "We have moved so fast that our souls have been left behind. We must wait here for them to catch up."
It's a profound image, and it perfectly reframes this whole debate about speed versus depth.
It really does. The critics of AI assume that using the technology is the act of rushing through the jungle, that you arrive at publication without having experienced the intellectual journey needed for true insight.
But the third wave view suggests the opposite. Deep, high-literacy AI usage is actually the act of sitting down with the porters.
I love that.
You're not speeding past your data, you're stopping to converse with it, using the tool to dig deeper than you could manage alone.
You're using the technology to help find that ambiguity and that flavor that the slow movement actually prizes.
And you're ensuring your qualitative soul is never left behind.
So we don't have to choose between intellectual fast food and analytical starvation. The conclusion is that we can absolutely cook with modern tools as long as we remain the chef.
The technology becomes a partner in conversation. It guides the inquiry, but it never replaces the consciousness that develops the questions. This deep dive shows us that technology isn't inherently antithetical to thoughtfulness or intellectual rigor. The perceived challenge is purely one of literacy and methodology.
Of mastering the rules of the kitchen, not rejecting the kitchen entirely.
Precisely. The intellectual weight remains squarely on the shoulders of the researcher, who has to define and refine the quality of the questions they pose.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. If the quality of your analysis now depends entirely on the sophistication of the question you ask the AI, consider your own current data set. What is the single most ambitious, nuanced, or ambiguous question you would dare to ask the machine? What question would force you, the chef, to truly interrogate the data, rather than just waiting for an easy, standardized answer?
Food for thought indeed.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Whispers, let's dive in. Qualitative flow, leading the way. Discover the tale